My name is Armin Kritzinger and welcome back to our course on the fundamental teachings of Christianity. God has a character of unselfish love that we can clearly see if we correctly understand His words and His actions. But God's enemy is always trying to portray God's character in an evil or a bad light so that people have the wrong picture or idea about God and God's character. But we know that truth is a revelation of God's character. The more truth we understand, the clearer we will understand God's character and His workings. The word evil, just by itself, probably shows us that it means that things are not the way that it's supposed to be. Why is there evil in our world? Where did evil start? Let us see what the Bible says about this. King David is perhaps the most famous king in the history of the nation of Israel. Absalom was a handsome son of King David. The Bible says in 2 Samuel chapter 14 verse 25, "But in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head there was no blemish in him." But David's son, Absalom, he wanted more than just people's admiration for his appearance. He also wanted his father's throne, his father's power. He wanted to be king. First, he killed his brother Amnon, who was the first child of David and supposed to inherit the throne. Then he started to sow subtle seeds of doubt about his father's leadership and laws. 2 Samuel 15 verse 6 says, "So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel." Then eventually he tried to assassinate his father and to steal the kingdom. But after a severe battle a few days later, David was back on his throne, but handsome Prince Absalom was slain. He was dead. This is a sad story. But this is not the first story of problems in a royal family. In God's kingdom, in heaven, there were similar events that led to a tragic rebellion and a great war. So what was the name of this rebellious prince in heaven? And why did he rebel? Isaiah chapter 14 verses 12 to 14 says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." Lucifer was the most powerful and beautiful of all of God's creatures. Lucifer, devil, the serpent, Satan, all of these words are used to describe the rebellious angel who's fighting against God and His government. He had a very high position amongst the angels. We can also notice how many times he uses the word I. He had an I problem. It seems that in contrast to God's character of unselfish love, Lucifer started to develop a character of selfish love. So when God first created Lucifer, did He create a devil? Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 15 says, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that you were created, till iniquity was found in you." God made a perfect angel, who, of his own free will, chose to become the devil. It might be very hard to imagine, but if we knew Lucifer before his fall, we would have loved Lucifer. You see, God could have made all His creatures like robots, but a robot cannot love. True love requires choice, and choice always brings a risk. This is why parents, even though they know that sometime in the future their children is probably going to be disobedient to them, they still choose to have children. So why did God allow Lucifer, Satan, to carry out this rebellion? The three main reasons that we want to look at. First, this settled forever the question whether God makes His creatures with the freedom of choice. Number two, if God had destroyed Lucifer as soon as he began spreading doubt about God's love and government, the other intelligent creatures would have forever had lingering questions. They might have thought, perhaps Lucifer was right. Therefore, Lucifer was allowed to demonstrate the horrible results of sin. And finally, God does not want his creatures to obey him merely because he will punish them if they don't. He wants us to obey from principles of love rather than from fear. So when this war broke out, what finally happened? Revelation chapter 12 verse 7 tells us, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels." Verse 9 says, "He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him." Eventually Lucifer and those angels who sided with him were cast out of heaven. What methods does Satan use in his work to destroy us and deceive us? Revelation 12 verse 9 tells us that Satan, which deceives the whole world, Satan uses deception. Mark chapter 1 verse 13 tells us, "And he was there in the wilderness 40 days, speaking about Jesus, tempted of Satan." So Satan also uses temptation. Revelation 16 verse 14 says, "For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles." So the Bible tells us that Satan and his angels also work miracles to deceive people. Revelation 12 verse 10, "For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." Satan is an accuser. And John chapter 8 verse 44, "He was a murderer from the beginning, for he is a liar and the father of it." God uses only truth in this battle, but Satan uses both truth and lies. 2 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 14 to 15 tells us, "And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works." Just like David's son Absalom pretended to love the people and care about the people so that he can deceive them, so Satan does the same thing. He pretends to care about you so that he can deceive you. And the devil even knows the Bible. Who is it that Satan hates the most? Revelation chapter 12 verse 17 tells us, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." Satan hates those people who choose to follow God. How did King David respond when he heard the tragic news of the death of his son Absalom? 2 Samuel chapter 18 verse 33 tells us, "And the king was much moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, thus he said, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son." David loved his son. Even though his son was rebellious and even tried to kill David and take his throne, David still loved his son Absalom. God has the same love for those who rebel. In Ezekiel chapter 33 verse 11, God says, "I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn ye from your evil ways. Why will you die?" God does not want anyone to suffer. He wants us all to take a look at the principles of God's government and God's character, and to take a look at the principle of Satan's character and Satan's government. And then we can make our choice. What will be your choice? Who will you love? Who will you serve?